Okay.
Where?
We do have a quorum of 5 people. Jan is not here yet. She is our chairman for this committee, but we do have Vice Chair Bonnie London. If you'd like to step into the role of chairing this meeting, we can begin.
Hey, Mary Beth. The only problem I have is that I'm actually picking my son up to drive him back home from school. So I'm not going to be able to read the instructions in those things. I know that Jan is coming. I can text her to see where she's at if you'd like.
Yeah, let me do that.
So you're going to text her?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. I know Greg is not able to be here today. And our other option would be for a recommendation for one of the committee members to chair the meeting for today. We could do it that way too.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Or Bonnie, you can chair and I can go down the agenda for you.
That'll work too.
That's probably easiest because if somebody else chairs, you have to go through the vote and everything else. So
Exactly.
if Bonnie, if you could be the voices chair, Mary Beth can tell you where you are.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So if you'd like to, I know everybody's participating via Zoom. If you need any special instructions, raise your hand and I can go down that whole list. But seeing that you've made it this far, you probably know what you're doing. So thank you. Bonnie, could you please call the meeting to order?
Like to call the meeting to order. It's 3:04.
And would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Yes, let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we'll go to roll call.
Okay, Vice Chair Bonnie London.
Here.
No Tim Underko. AJ Moyer.
Here.
Jean Wilson.
Here.
Beth Cohen.
Here.
Randy Elder.
Here.
Auxiliary Member Ramona Brockman.
Here.
And Greg is not here. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is committee comment for items not on the agenda. So any of our committee members that have something not on this agenda, here is your chance to speak, and you would just raise your hand. Seeing none. Now we move to public comment. So our members of the public that are in attendance today, if you would like to make a comment for items not on this agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing none. And we move forward with adoption of the agenda for a motion and a second from any of the committee members.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
And can I get a second?
Second.
Who said that?
AJ Moyer. Aye.
Thank you, AJ.
It was just so fast, the light went on and off, like, oh, I didn't see
No,
that.
I looked up, it was gone. And roll call vote, please.
Okay, Bonnie London,
Yes.
AJ Moyer,
Yes.
Jean Wilson,
Yes.
Beth Cohen,
Yes.
and Randy Elder.
And now we move on to approval of the consent agenda. I need a motion and a second, and Carol will do a roll call vote.
I move.
Randy? Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay, Bonnie London,
Yes.
AJ Moyer,
Yes.
Jean Wilson,
Yes.
Beth Cohen,
Yes.
and Randy Elder.
Here.
And I see that Jan is in attendance.
Yes, she just arrived.
Sorry, team.
That's okay. So at this point, we're up to committee matters. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mark Teague of PlaceWorks for his presentation on land use today.
Thank you, Boone. Mary Beth. Thank you all, everybody. I'm just apparently confused this afternoon. Hopefully you can all see my screen.
Yep.
All right. And I'm going to dispense with the normal introductory because you've all seen it a gazillion times. You already know where all the documents are, and there's things on there. So we're going to go to defining terms. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting, we've talked about at several of the subcommittee meetings, is that to a large extent, what you call things matters in the general plan, and everybody has a different definition of something. So I had asked, and we have received pictures that define folks' version of rural. And to a person, they've all taken pictures of the pretty rural stuff. Lacking in these pictures are stacks of disused farming equipment, cow manure, things like that, that also attend rural development. And but neither here nor there, some of the concepts with rural brought up by the Southeast 80 subcommittee involved curbs and gutters, paths instead of sidewalks, maintaining natural grade. This was awesome when they went through a lot of these because it was like watching popcorn in a microwave. Just ideas were going everywhere, and I had to write them down very quickly. A lot of these make wonderful policies and are good to define, and really are appropriate almost anywhere you are in town. So we can have rural at the edges, and we can have rural in the small town in the middle. We just have to vary how some of the measurements go. But eclectic, not formulaic. Now some of these are my words. Open property fronts, with long setbacks, those types of things. And I don't remember where the picture on the bottom right came to, but I so desperately want to go there and spend about a week. That's just a gorgeous shot of a dirt road lined by trees. But this was the definition of rural: trees along roadways, high ratio of parcel size to home size. One of the things that we've talked about before is floor area ratio, and that's really what that speaks to. If you have a large property, you can have a large home. If you have a small property, maybe you shouldn't have such as large a home on that property. That sort of thing, planners teasingly call McMansions, where somebody buys a small piece of property and puts the largest physically possible structure on there. And it tends to become a problem over time because it doesn't look proportioned. It doesn't go well. So this is what rural meant to one of the subcommittees. We also talked about what constitutes a small town and what small town character looks like. And I love these pictures because to me, they embody both rural and small town. And I normally put the two of those together, but there are small urban towns. We're not one of them. But it talks about, we need to know what rural character means. These are phrases that people bring up consistently on the comments that we receive. And I'm fine using them, except that we need to define what we mean by them. For them to have regulatory effect, we need to be able to explain to people what we mean. And in some cases, distribution and organization of uses, walkability, those types of things. To me, a small town is when you can walk through in about 10, 15 minutes. I would contend that Loomis qualifies in that. You can pretty much walk all of Main Street in that period of time and not break out much of a sweat. But to other people, it has different definitions. Should improvements, meaning street improvements, street lights, sidewalks, curbs, gutters, be everywhere? Or should they be focused in the center of town? And as you move out toward the edge of town, maybe they become less and less or become less formal. Maybe toward the edge of town, they're asphalt trails or dirt trails or DG trails or something along those lines. So if you wanted to walk or ride your horse or whatever into town to get a cup of coffee, you have that ability, but it's really a rural ability. It's not a formal urban-esque, pedestrian lighting every 300 feet on center with an iconic trash receptacle every 600 feet, the sorts of things you would see in a really formal park-like setting. Are there minimum improvements? We spent quite a bit of time talking about this, and I found this interesting. Some people perceive that a small town has wide streets and sidewalks and curbs and gutters and all sorts of interesting things that I actually attribute to a more urban environment like Roseville. And others in that conversation talked about, well, wait a minute, that isn't my definition of a small town. Maybe in a small town, we don't have sidewalks in all the streets. Anyway, we need to come to a conclusion on that because that will bleed over into the circulation discussion as well, and also goes into development standards. I know that there are parts of town where there's a variety of different improvement types. We just need to have a decision made on that. So this is what I'm talking about. And these are my words. And by no means do I want to put them in anybody's vernacular. But when I've heard everything I've heard, I said, maybe there's no one definition. Maybe it's a collection of things that make up the town. And I know I'm kind of punting here and kicking the can down the road. But the idea here is as you get to the nucleus, the center of town, things perhaps get a little more developed. That's where you have traffic and that's where you have those sorts of things. As you move away from the town, as the density and intensity of development moves away from town, maybe those improvements and that level of intensity peters off quickly so that there's always an edge of town that is obvious. And it's just as you move closer to the center of town where things get a little more developed. Just putting that out there as an idea. I don't know if anybody likes it, certainly, and I have no, if you want to jettison the whole thing, come up with your own definition, totally fine. But I wanted us to start somewhere with the conversation. And I always find it easier if somebody throws an idea out, everybody else can chat about it. Whereas just we sit around looking at each other, waiting for somebody to throw out an idea. So I don't mind being the sacrificial lamb in this one. But I thought this would be both an amateurish graphic. I put this together all by my lonesome, but it gets to the idea of where development may or may not occur and what it looks like. So we should probably talk through that at some point so that we have a good founding definition that can lead the discussion in the land use element. A number of you sent in some awesome photos of houses. I love these. These are just awesome to me. I used to live in a 1920s version of this greenhouse right here. And I would have killed to have a 21st century version of it because the 1920s version of it sucked. It was dimensional lumber. I couldn't make any improvements. It was awful. But I did learn how to heat the house with a wood stove. So I guess there's some benefits. So here are the descriptions that we have: agricultural estate, low, medium density, compatible uses. I don't know what that means. So we should really talk about what we mean by that. And then what we mean by high density. Do we mean multifamily or do we mean cottage apartments? I have a friend who lives in Ashland, Oregon, who lives in a cottage subdivision that is along a creek. And she owns about 3,000 square feet. 2,800 of it is her house. The rest of it is all common area that they all share and that is maintained by an HOA. And I think it's about 15, 16 units to the acre. But it's ideal. She's a retired school teacher and absolutely loves it. So there are different options for multifamily and for higher density that don't necessarily mean an apartment building. But we need to talk about what those mean. The phrase limited industrial, let's be clear here. Smokestack industries are not going to be in Loomis. They're probably not going to be in California. Outside of a few refineries that we find in different spots of the state, smokestack industries just don't happen any longer. When we talk about industry, we're talking about something along these lines where you may have a shop. There's probably a professional office involved. So they have an office storefront on a street, and then they have a place in the back where they might assemble something or conduct some testing. You can sometimes get paint shops in here. You can actually see a little forklift here. This is the type of industry that planners refer to as industrial. It can be scaled up to huge distribution centers that I don't think personally would be appropriate in Loomis. But honestly, this is small business starting off or basically staying small in these types of businesses. I love stuff like this because to me, this is what a small rural town looks like. Right? This is what we have here. We need to know what the committee thinks and what the town wants to do. We can embellish this, we can add or subtract. The reason that you want to have a place in your town to do smelly, noisy, ugly things is that this is where jobs come from. People that manufacture things like this tend to earn a living wage and buy houses and be members of the community, sponsor little league teams and play coach soccer. So this is the type of stuff that is the bread and butter of small towns everywhere, and it should be encouraged. But we have to be careful about edges, right? What if there were houses here? Is it going to annoy someone? So we want these folks to be protected, and we want the future houses to be protected as well. The phrase light industrial really means glorified office. These are awesome. I love RVs. I'm in the market for one. And the idea here that this might be a little more heavy. There might be a little more outdoor storage. This is where I would put a lumber yard. This is where I would put a home improvement center where they might have outdoor storage of gravel and bark and things that you would use to maintain your property or embellish it. Those sorts of things. Not particularly pretty, but not obnoxious to live next to either. Although, here in Roseville, we have a couple of gravel and cement spots that I wouldn't want to live next to. But honestly, they're not very noisy or dusty. But it is something to consider, and we should probably have a spot for that in town. Business park. There's no pictures of those, which is fine with me. We all kind of know what a business park looks like. I think business park ought to be with a small B and a small P for Loomis. Roseville or Rockland or you name it, Rancho Cordova style business park might overwhelm the parts of town that we're in. We do have a large area of town that is south on Taylor that is designated business park, but that committee will tell you, as did one of the fellows on that committee, there's no access to that big. And so at the end of the day, it may not function very well as that particular use. But these are the types of things that go into a business park, and maybe we should refine what's appropriate for the town. I may be off base. Maybe you do want a large, IBM type campus here. I just don't know where it would go. But certainly if that's something that would be open to the committee, then we need to include that in the plan. So we talked about how goals and policies get written. There is a longer PowerPoint presentation on in the utilities. I think Mary Beth put it where the resources live that we should talk about. And of course you have public comments. So these are the public comments. I hope you've read them. I apologize for them, for the text heavy nature of this slide. But there's some interesting comments in here, and not all of them are consistent, which is normal. But we have to weave our way through them and pay attention to the ones that are said, because it's great when people comment on what we're doing. So there's some folks in here that talk about putting more housing in different places, talk about rezoning to increase the density in some of our areas near the downtown, which seems to make sense. Most of these talk about upzoning, which is interesting to me because when we were doing the outreach, we had the open shops. Most of the comments I received from residents was to not upzone. So there's obviously going to need to be some discussion in that regard. These are the existing goals and some of my thoughts. Some of the stuff here is important, but perhaps isn't the land use goal. Land use, I like to have focus on change and development. Some of this talks about conservation. Now, there are certainly aspects of this that might necessarily be important. For example, I like policies that require new development to include natural drainages as part of their design and prohibit filling them. And that requires a developer to think, as opposed to just use a D9 and make everything flat and start over. I think that towns that do that end up with some interesting development. Maybe it's not as draconian as that. Maybe you have you specify when it's okay to fill certain things. But honestly, if you want to keep a natural drainage and you want that flow, then it can't be manufactured. We have an oak woodland preservation piece, which I think is awesome. Big fan of oaks. Perhaps some of this ends up in the conservation element. Doesn't matter if it stays here. It's just that at a certain point, it doesn't really talk about development. It talks about preservation and conservation. We have some character statements that I think are appropriate. So I have notes in here for perhaps refine and keep. Like this one makes sense. Focus more intensive land uses near the downtown and freeway interchange by maintaining a prominently agricultural rural character outside the core area. I think this is a good start. I think we need to add some words to it and maybe a paragraph in the land use element explaining the overall concept, like I did with that graphic, of this is how the town wishes to move forward. Statements like this make economic development people happy, but they don't really do much for you. Attract new development, land uses provide jobs to town residents, provided those are consistent with the town's character. This doesn't give the council any authority to deny a project, nor does it encourage anyone to come here. If we need to say this, then let's say it in the narrative of the plan. Again, these are my opinions, which is what you pay me for. Designate adequate land. Well, that's what we're doing. So policies like this, and I understand, I think it was Gene told us the history of why some of this stuff is in here. I get it. But right now, if we're going to designate something on the map, it needs to be on the map. Then we shouldn't have to have a policy for it. So that's how we normally do that. Always up for revenue enhancement. Again, this is something that ought to be built in. We refer to that as baked into the bread. It's hard to add the raisins after you've made the cinnamon bread. So in this instance, we put it on the land use map. We make sure it's part of the land use designations and narrative, and should be baked in. But it doesn't hurt to have a policy that talks about economic development and increasing revenue, because after all, that's how we pay for things. So here are some of the rules we did last time. Future development areas. One of the areas that has become quite the topic of discussion is this piece right here. This is what I referred to earlier. This looks great on a map, but in a practical sense, all of the access would have to be off of Sierra College. And it isn't even directly on Sierra College. It is off of this road here, whose name escapes me. And this is a residential area. So we would be bringing big trucks, lots of traffic to this little triangle, and maybe that's not appropriate. And we'll be talking about that with the subcommittee on that, but the land use committee should probably think about that as well, and what the other uses might be in that area. There's probably zero potential in our lifetime to get an at-grade crossing at the railroad on anywhere along this stretch. And to my way of thinking, a railroad crossing in this location doesn't make any sense, elevated or depressed. And I just had my eyes opened. I'm working in another community, and the cost for a grade separated rail crossing in their town, I don't know the particulars, is approaching $70 million. So maybe suggesting that's not going to happen. I don't know why it costs that much either, Andy. Maybe prices have gone up since the last time I did one. Different uses, different area. This is our charge. We have some subcommittee recommendations that will come from these areas, of course, but we should look at it as a larger picture. And then we have stuff for the next meeting, which is rolling up your sleeves and getting into some policies. You have a number of them on there, and we should probably go through them and decide which ones we're going to keep and which ones no longer fit the need for the town. And as always, I'll keep my presentation around so we can point to pieces of it, but that concludes my presentation for this afternoon.
Thank you, Mark. Mary Beth, I have to apologize to everybody for being late. I am so sorry. I had 2 subsequent meetings and then I had technical difficulties. So my humble apologies to everybody. Great presentation, Mark. I do have a couple questions, but I'll wait and see if anybody else does before I ask.
And also for everybody, I put in our chat the link to writing goals, policies, and objectives. If you haven't seen it, you can click on the link. It'll take you to our website where that slide deck is for that presentation. Okay, we got a hand. Bonnie, proceed.
Hi, and I think I have less questions and more just comments and observations. So the market analysis study I found to be really, really interesting, with our town being quite unique in that the majority of our sales tax revenue comes from non-retail purchases or uses. And so the industrial and the office is a huge revenue generator for us. And so I found that to be quite interesting. The other thing is just, I sent an article from the Washington Post to the other planning commissioners because we just got done reviewing the housing element. And, as many of you are probably fully aware, that Placer County has been, on track for, expansive growth since the blueprint from SACOG about, I guess, maybe 25 to 30 years ago. And so, I think that, some people did not realize that was happening, but I think many did. We knew that it was coming, but with COVID, I mean, it's here. It's been trickling in, but it's just accelerated, this past year. And so, I really think that we have got to be very mindful about housing, that the state mandates are so much more restrictive and restrictive of local control, and that we really need to get in front of that and try to get, some actual affordable units produced, or else, we'll just get in the cycle of needing to upzone every 8 years with the housing element. And, kind of reviewing the history, because I'm a newbie to Loomis, my observation and what I hear from, some of the folks who've been around for a while is that Town of Loomis incorporated because it did not want to be a bedroom community, or suburbia of, the greater Sacramento region. And I think that most of us are drawn to Loomis because it is quite unique. And so, really trying to, hone in on design elements and standards to keep, the, kind of unique eclectic quality, as opposed to, again, kind of a generic, typical suburban style, whether it's commercial or residential, I think is quite important. And then I guess the last observation for me, the most eye-opening thing is, our deficiency of parks and open space that, we are supposed to, our goal is to have 5 acres per thousand residents, and yet we are maybe at 1 acre, if that. And then with all of the intensification of downtown, sadly, there's really not a whole lot of community benefits that have been enhanced or added. And so the one park that we have there, the Blue Anchor Park, I think that we qualify that it's 3 acres, but it's in all actuality less than 1 acre and 2 acres of parking lot. And so, as I've been walking around, and we did a placemaking activity with the Leadership Loomis class yesterday, there really could be an awful lot more of, public spaces, greenery, ways to make that downtown more livable, especially since we're trying to intensify it with more residential. So those are a lot of comments that I have. Thanks.
Jean, go ahead.
I had a comment if Mark could go back to, let's see, which one? It's the one that had about what is rural, and it talked about setbacks and space between buildings. And mostly we've talked on the southeast side of the freeway, not on the northwest side, but I think the setbacks, I don't know that we need to change the setbacks because they seem to be adequate. Most of the parcels along Barton Road, which is our main road there, are already set back. And there aren't a lot of non-developed parcels along there. People move to the country in order to have space around them. So I don't know that we need to mess with that one particularly. We can look at it, but I'm not sure that that's one that needs fixing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The other one,
Jean, not to interrupt, but that wasn't the intent of the slide. This was the definition of what makes it rural. No one was asking to change them.
Well, I thought you made a remark at one of those that, maybe we need to make setbacks, and I'm thinking we already have setbacks. And as far as my concern in the rural areas is about defining setbacks between buildings, because people are using those buildings and in ways that make sense for the use. When the Planning Commission looked at setbacks, basically we said, okay, what does the fire department say? And we made that kind of ruling that it needed, I don't remember what they said, 10 or 15 feet or something for fire purposes. But I look at this and I think, do we really need to go telling people how far apart their buildings have to be on a 3, 4, 10 acre parcel? I don't think so. So I'm not sure if you were saying that we need to set things like that or just look at what we have and see if it looks reasonable.
In this particular contents, these were comments made by the subcommittee, the I-80 subcommittee, on what they figured rural was. I don't have issue with any of this, and this is all great stuff. We just need to include it in the plan if that's what we want to do for rural. I don't have any grief. I wouldn't think any of this would be bad. I think the fire department allows buildings a lot closer together than that, but we don't necessarily have to go there. We don't have to go with the minimum. You can specify distance between buildings. But no, this was all from the subcommittee and what they thought defined rural. And it seems to me that Loomis already has all of this. And I don't know that I'd propose to change it necessarily. I think it works whether you're at the outskirts of town or or in the middle of town as well. So,
Okay, it looked to me like was saying that we should have, we should set definite setbacks to make sure the buildings are spread out in the property. And sometimes that doesn't make a lot of sense. And if the
Right.
buildings are set back anyway from the street because of the uses that people have, their barns or whatever,
Yeah.
I would want this to be taken as we need to regulate setbacks more properly and make sure that we get all the buildings spread out for the benefit of the person driving by rather than the use of the property owner. That would be my concern.
That is a good concern because I think that's where some of the committee members were going. But typically we don't worry about setbacks in a general plan.
Okay.
That's a zoning issue.
I noticed that you did not talk about specifically, at least I didn't quite catch it, our limited light industrial area, which is the section that specifically backs up along the residential. And we do have a separate zoning for that because of that. And we have stricter rules about what you can have along there just to protect the residents. So I just wanted to point out that we do have a different zone for that with stricter rules. The LL, anyway, it's limited light industrial.
Purple, yes.
Okay, I see Tim Underko's hands up.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. Hi, Madam Chair. Can you come back to me in 2 minutes, or I'll follow the next set of questions. I'm trying to tie something up real quick, and then I can be available. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'll get in line.
No
Okay.
worries. Is anybody else got their hand up?
Not that I see.
No. Okay, I have a couple questions for you, Mark, and also Mary Beth, and it's in regards to public comment and the slide that you pulled up. I just want to remind everybody that we can look at the public comment through a link, isn't that right, Mary Beth, for everybody's public comment? Can you explain how we as a committee can look at the public comments that have been turned in?
Yes. Let me find them.
Anyway, one of my points is I believe this might be from one person, this public comment, unless I could be mistaken. But I just wanted to make sure that it made me think, oh yeah, we definitely need to make sure to continually look at that.
And Madam Chair, we have comments coming in pretty much daily.
Yeah.
And this PowerPoint was produced about 2 weeks ago. So
yeah,
there's going to be a lag time in PowerPoint. As we start writing and we get more things doing, I will be checking the comments pretty regularly. So maybe I can embellish a PowerPoint during a meeting if something comes up.
right.
It is a good habit for the chair or for the committee to look at them themselves.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say that this is one public comment from one person on this slide. Is that right?
And which comment are you referring to?
The one that's on the slide.
Oh, all of that being one comment
Yes.
from one person?
Yes.
Um,
I'm pretty sure it is, but I just.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I recognize that it is all from one person. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. And also, again, as a reminder, a great reminder that we do need to. And then you'll post the link, Mary Beth, for everybody?
yeah, I think, when I first sent that out to the Planning Commission and the council, it wasn't quite what I wanted to post on the website. So we're refining those and replying to comments at this time. And as soon as I get an updated version of that, it will be posted on the website. So we have over probably 700 comments by now.
Yeah.
So it's quite lengthy.
Awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. And now Tim's got his hand up again.
Okay, let me get back there.
Thanks,
Go ahead,
Jan.
Tim.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, hi there. Well, I wanted to address comments that Jean made about, it was me who made the comments in the prior meeting about setbacks. And while I understand that land use might not be the right place to take setback comments up, the land use and the zoning code have to coordinate with themselves. And so it's not like they're totally exclusive from each other. But, you know, I have heard comments over the years of potential businesses coming into downtown and their concern about the setback requirements. And that's where my comments originated from. I wanted to insert what I had heard and concerns that potential business owners had in coming to the downtown. I have never heard anybody complain or have any comments about the rural areas or semi-rural areas of Loomis in relation to the setbacks. But, you know, downtown's kind of funky in a certain way where you have 0 setbacks required on certain areas of downtown on one block. And then the next block, you have a 5-foot setback or whatever it is. And what I don't want to do is limit our ability to bring in new businesses because we're stuck on this old, you know, setback conversation. If a business is coming to us and saying that we want to come to Loomis and we have concerns about, you know, the setback requirements, I think that the general plan should be flexible enough and the zoning code should be flexible enough to allow for those things, at least without having to go through a whole general plan amendment. Because anytime you change the zoning code, you have to make a general plan amendment. So that's why they're all interconnected. So those are my comments, and I'd love for staff to weigh in. But that's in essence where I was going with my comments about the setback requirements. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Tim. And before we go on to the next hand that's raised, I see Ramona. Anders, are you on the line?
I am.
Can you respond to Tim? And then can you also formulate, you know, the fact is we do have the housing element that is going to have to be gone through first. And then it's going to link to our job here as a land use committee. And then it will go to the zoning code. Can you just sort of formulate that and
Mark,
frame?
Yeah, Mark, could you go back to the slide showing goals down to implementation? Oh, there it is. Okay. So first of all, what we're doing in the land use element is developing goals. These again are the general expression of where we want to be. And then the objectives are the quantifiable, hopefully setting some goals where we can say within 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we're going to do the following. And then policies, again, are those things that, you know, may be talking about, you know, how we achieve goals. And then the actions, those are the implementation measures. And one of the implementation measures for the land use element is actually updating the land use diagram. And that would show the various land uses on it. So how this works is you have the land use element, you have the housing element. The housing element is talking about how much land you need identified for affordable housing. The land use element has to pick that up, refer to that, and part of the implementation then is updating the land use diagram to indicate the increased density in a few locations to accommodate housing. And then part of the land use diagram and the implementation is then you need to update the zoning code and the zoning map to be consistent with the land use plan, housing plan, and the land use diagram. So they all intertie together. There's other things. I mean, Mark brought up the conservation of resources ties into the land use also. So one of the things we'll be doing is in each of the elements, we'll have a discussion of other goals, policies, objectives that interact with the element that is being described so that we can refer to those but not repeat them. One of the things we don't want to do in a general plan or a code is to repeat the same thing, because we have, my experience, and I think Mark's experience is, you find something repeated and it doesn't get updated always, and all of a sudden you're in conflict. And so we have a project running through the town right now that has a conflict. And so we're going to have to go to the planning commission and say, which is it, A or B, because there's a conflict in your code. So our intent is not to have conflicts. I don't know if that's your question as far as, Tim, what you were saying, I think falls in line with this whole process, that the zoning code has to be consistent with the general plan. I think Mark is looking at making sure the land use element is broad and flexible enough that the zoning code can be modified and still be compliant with the general plan without having to redo the general plan. I think that's a goal that we all have, is to make sure the general plan is flexible enough. And the other comment I just had is, I think, Mark, your concept of kind of the very rural going towards the center of town, that's how the town of Loomis is currently developed. And I think defining that, I think, would be very helpful. I like your concept. So Jan, did that answer your questions?
Well, yeah, I think so. And it might have also elicited some more questions, which is fantastic. But I did want to go to Ramona. I think she might have been next.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess first, I would like to agree the same with Anders about the concept of, the very traditional idea of how towns are constructed, is that it's more dense in the middle and it goes out to the more rural edges with less intensity, less density. It's just classic traditional, or what is now called, new urbanist design, but really it's how Loomis started. It's how all old towns really are designed and started. And keeping that is very, very important. And so, so I'm really looking forward to the density game, or the density thing, because, I think people really have a misunderstanding of, things can be dense and have higher density, but yet they read to being not, it could be deceptive, I guess, because I've played one of these little games or have done a little activity like that before. And it's really, really eye-opening to see what people's misconception of what density is and what it looks like. So I think that'll be a very good thing for people to participate in, because you might be surprised as to your misconceptions of what density is and what it isn't and how it looks. Anyway, so that kind of leads to my other question is, in the housing element, this whole issue of affordable housing and needing to meet affordable housing and accommodate for it, is there a way for Loomis to really look at utilizing and promoting accessory dwelling units, or larger ones or smaller ones, junior ADUs, to meet our affordable housing needs? To me, it seems that, obviously you can have higher density zoning or put in some multifamily units, and that's fine too. But, Loomis only has so much land. It's a very small town. And again, you have to weigh out how much of this land you need for certain things, whether it's all in town, whether you have industrial or light industrial, where, do you have more retail? Where do your houses go? Where do your multi-family unit houses go? So, real estate for Loomis is very, very limited, because we're a very small town with very, small borders. So I was wanting to look at accessory dwelling units in trying to meet our affordable housing needs. And will the state, one, even allow that? Will they even allow you to use ADUs into your figures for meeting your RENA numbers? I'm not quite familiar totally with how that RENA thing works. But nonetheless, it would help, I think, to help not keep the character of Loomis. You can add more doors if you want to think of it that way on parcels, but not necessarily change the character of the area so much, especially, if people have 4.6 acres or 2.3 acres, adding an accessory dwelling unit is really not going to change the character of that area, but you will certainly help increase the density without noticing it too much. And last comment on the setbacks, just even though it doesn't really belong in what we're doing right now with general plan, you know, I like the idea of flexibility, but in certain areas like downtown, if you want to retain its characteristic historic look, setbacks tended to be, well, 0 at the street edge, right in the downtown area is 0. But, you know, setbacks then in other areas that are 4.6 or 2.3 or 1 acre, you know, you want to avoid having things be cookie cutter, meaning that everybody's setback has to be the same thing. And you lose the diversity element of the design in Loomis, which I think, is there a way to kind of get that into our written statements of allowing for flexibility? But really, I think what we're kind of hitting on is design standards, maybe, that we'd like to promote a certain design and character, and how do we fit that into the general plan?
Thank you. Appreciate all your comments. And I just wanted to add, for the team, the committee, our RENA numbers, we have 352 homes. Of those, 117 are very low income in that class, low 71 homes, low income, moderate, low 49, and then above moderate 115. And Anders, if you could answer that question about ADUs, because I think that it would be really important for all of us to understand, do the ADUs help us lower those numbers? And also, with the new development coming in on the former Villages site, how does that affect our RENA numbers?
Accessory dwelling units can work toward our numbers. And the way the analysis was conducted in the housing element is looking at existing ADUs and what was built and projecting that forward. So if we build ADUs, you know, from June 1st on, and they are affordable, very affordable, then yes, they do count. A couple things, and Jean pointed this out before, that the town of Loomis has allowed ADUs for some time. They've been called granny flats and other things. Those are in the zoning code. And the state of California allows every lot to have 2 ADUs. One's a junior ADU, which is attached to the building, and one is a regular ADU, which is not attached to the building. So those are allowed right now. So one of the things that I think we may want to talk about, both in the housing element as it proceeds forward, and also in the land use element, are there things that can be done to encourage the ADUs by the town? I mean, the town is limited, it has limited funds. At this time, the town is willing to accept the building plans from Placer County, which are pre-approved by Placer County in order to move ADUs ahead faster. But it really gets into probably what other things might the town do, or other agencies and so collaborative agencies or facilities or service clubs, whatever, to encourage ADUs in the town of Loomis. There's only so much the town can do. There's a limited amount of funding that the town has. So right now the town, given its zoning code, given the state law, given the building department, because I believe ADUs also have a reduced fee attached to them, is encouraging the construction of ADUs. So that's in place today.
So can you just kind of explain, you said June 1st.
The housing element begins June 1st, 2021, and it goes for 8 years. So the counting of ADUs for the next 8-year period will start June 1st.
So, but the RENA numbers, we've had them over the last many years, right? So haven't we been able to lower that number with ADUs built since that time?
I believe we have. There have been ADUs, and I believe we accomplished meeting some of those goals. And Lucy, I see her online. You could probably help answer that question better than myself, since Lucy helped with the housing element.
So the town has counted ADUs specifically for the 5th cycle. I want to say there were 5 or 6 that ended up getting counted towards RENA. none of those were lower income. So they did not count towards lower income RENA. So the town can do a monitoring program moving forward if they want to make sure they're lower income, but it's typically not. And SACOG also has an analysis that we've used in the housing element to project how many ADUs will be built and how many of those would be built for lower income, moderate income, and above moderate income. Now, it's one thing to keep in mind, the RENA, so every 8 years you get a RENA and you have to plan for it. If you build 352 units, you will still get another RENA in 8 years. It doesn't diminish that moving forward. It's just the capacity you have can be used again in the future if it still exists.
Okay. We may come back to this again. And I know Jean has had her hand up for a while.
Okay, I lost my track on something I was going to say, but I'll go to the RENAs first because that's the ADUs, because that's what we've been talking about just now. The housing committee, some of you are on that, some aren't, did talk about that, and we don't have very many projected, and I think we can do more than probably was in the projection, which is based on the state's formula, apparently, based on what we've done in the past. And I think Bonnie's correct that we can do more than that, but it was pointed out if we put into our plan a certain number that we're going to do because we think we can, but we don't meet that number, then we're going to be back in the position. Let's say we say we're going to do X number per year and we don't meet that, then apparently we could be back in the position of having to do something else to make up for, to rezone something or do some other way to make up for what we didn't get done. So I think the housing committee felt in general we're better off to build more than we said and get credit for it than to not build what we said we would do and be in hot water for it. Lucy can correct me if I'm wrong kind of on that.
Yeah,
that's absolutely correct. Yeah. You can build, if you want to build 30 a year, if you do that, you can count all of those. But if you project that like 10, 20, 30 a year and you don't build it, the state does require with ADUs that you are you're actually building them. So if you get halfway into the cycle and you're not building them, you have to find land and rezone elsewhere to accommodate them. So it's better to under project and over deliver in that sense.
Yeah, and I think after listening to Bonnie at the housing committee, it really hit me. The general plan for the town of Loomis should be visionary. The housing element is regulatory because the state of California is using that as a regulatory tool. So the visionary statements really belong in all the other elements, but when it comes to the housing element, if we don't accomplish something, we can be dinged. And that means, grants may not come forward. And Sean the other day was explaining, well, the general plan update is part of a grant. The improvements on Taylor Road were part of a grant. And there's the town utilizes grants from the state of California, the federal government, extensively. So having a housing element that you're in compliance with and considering it's more of a regulatory document than a visionary document, I think helps understand the difference between the two. And Mark and Lucy, if I'm wrong on that, let me know. But
we like to hide the housing element on the very last page of the general plan because it really is a regulatory beast. And not to put too fine a point on it, but you can build ADUs now. It's been allowed for the last decade. We used to call them, they've been around for as long as I've been a planner. So this is nothing new. And it really doesn't affect land use because the state has occupied that space and says you will allow them as a permitted use on residentially zoned land. So for our purposes as a committee, I don't know that it pays to spend a whole lot of time focused on them because we really have no control over them. The state has said they will be there. One of the dirty little secrets of ADUs that everybody gets excited about, it's just as expensive to build one of those as it is to build a regular house. You don't get a bonus for doing that. You don't get a break, maybe on the land use. And the other part of this that I find interesting to me is I can't get people to share a car or ride a bus, but we're going to invite a bunch of people we don't know to live on our house, right next to our house on our property. I have a hard time that that's going to be an overwhelming concept in California, but Maybe I'm wrong. I'd like to have an ADU because I have kids I want to kick out of my house, but that's a different discussion. So,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I would say the reason that I'm bringing it up and the reason that I think it's super important for this community to talk about is if we don't meet our RENA numbers and we've got these developments coming in and we have no exclusionary ordinances or anything, and they're going to build market rate, then we're going to have to transfer those densities to other properties with different land use designations. So I actually really do think it's important for this committee to understand why we are talking about it. And because we don't have an exclusionary ordinance, we could be in trouble when it comes to trying to find places and identifying land that you can have higher densities on. So that's the reason I think it's important. So let's go to Tim.
I wasn't really finished. Can I finish what I was going to say?
Well, of course.
I wanted a clarification. I maybe misunderstood what Tim said. I thought he said that if we change the zoning ordinance, like setbacks, we have to change the general plan. But maybe I misheard him, but we change ordinances not frequently, but we do that, and it's not a general plan change. That would be going through any ordinance goes through the planning commission and the council and waits for a second reading, and then it's an ordinance. So there isn't the same level of having to change the general plan just to do an ordinance change. But maybe I misunderstood Tim.
If I can respond to that real quick, because I know Tim has his hand up. Tim did say that. And in your current general plan, there are some zoning specifics that you would have to do a general plan amendment to alter. It does get into lot sizes and building heights and all sorts of things that we normally put in a zoning code. But you are absolutely right, Gene, in that when we do an update to a land use summit, as Andy pointed out, we like to have some flexibility. So the general plan land use element talks about concepts, broad ideas, and what you're trying to get at. For the specificity, you look at the zoning, and you can have a number of different zoning districts that fit under the same land use designation. Industrial is a good one. Usually we have a single industrial land use designation, and we may have different industrial zones under that have different rules because of where they are. Residential, it's one thing to have a high density residential land use designation, but you might have R2 for duplexes, R3 for apartments. You may even have an uber high one, depending. It all fits under the same umbrella. But your current general plan, and maybe this is what Tim was referring to, has a lot more specificity and wouldn't necessarily give you the flexibility that we would build into a new general plan.
I don't think we have setbacks, though, in the general plan. Those are in the zoning ordinance, as far as I know.
Yeah, but there are building heights and lot sizes and some other things that we would also normally kick to a general plan. I went through that in one of the previous presentations.
Right. I think I pointed out that we were starting over, and that may be one reason for some of the specificity.
Yes.
As I've thought about that, some of the rest of it may have been simply because they wanted to make sure that it got in there what we wanted and not make it easy to change. So that could also have been a factor. In other words, here's what we want, and we're not going to make just exceptions and make it easy to change the zoning ordinance. We're going to say what we want and stick with it. I don't know. That could have been some of it too.
Thank you, Jean. Tim.
Thank you, Jan. So I have a comment and a request and a reply. So first of all, ADUs, those come up a lot in Loomis as far as conversation, but let's just be practical. ADUs are not going to make a real impact on our affordable housing issues. I mean, if we put 8 ADUs, if we approved 8 ADUs over the last 8 years, let's just do the math. Over the next 10 years, we can expect to do 10. So, ADUs sound nice in conversation, but they're not going to be a solution to addressing our affordable housing issue when you have hundreds of lots that need to be identified. So that I would just assume move on from the ADU conversation and and think about bigger pictures when it comes to designating parcels for affordable housing. But that's just my position. Second, I would really appreciate if, so like for a while, like things would come up, issues have come up where staff comes back and says, well, we have a conflict with this and we have a conflict with that. What I want to do is try to get those down on paper. I mean, we've aired, those grievances have been aired over the years. And what we want to do in this, what I'd like to see in this general plan, and I think there's a lot of consensus out there to clean up some of the inconsistencies. But that's a technical issue, and I technically don't know what those inconsistencies are because I haven't been keeping track of those. But they have been coming up. I mean, these issues do come up periodically when applications are running through, and so I would like staff to put together a list of those inconsistencies that we are aware of so that this committee can come back at a later date and know what we're trying to clean up, right? It's nice to talk about theory. Yeah, nobody really wants inconsistencies. I think there are some, let's see, there are some conspiracy theories out there that believe that the inconsistencies are on paper for a reason, and that is to bind up applications. And maybe that's true, but if it's not the case and we don't have any intention to have inconsistencies, then what are those specifically? That's what I would like to know from staff so that we can better address those in this committee. And as far as the setback conversation, yeah, it's a little confusing, Gene, because it's like, well, yes, we can do an ordinance to just allow for a setback without having to do a general plan amendment. But then there's a lot of confusion there. It's like that's up to argument. It's up to interpretation. In a lot of cases, we can't just the planning commission can't just arbitrarily make a zoning change. I mean, general plan amendments are required to make a lot of the zoning changes. What those are specifically, I'm not clear on, but you know, I just assume clean this stuff up now rather than try to clean it up on an a la carte basis. So those are my comments regarding that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Tim. Anybody else got their hand up?
Real quickly to respond on that, rather than creating a list of inconsistencies, in fact, in today's presentation, Mark already kind of pointed a couple out that goals and policies within the land use element should be moved into conservation. But as we actually come back, and I think we're looking at the next meeting to actually have goals and policies and show the edits to those, and we'll start showing you where there are inconsistencies, because there are some policy choices to be made on land coverage, density, whatever, and we'll give you those choices to say which is it, A or B, but we need to be consistent. So I think as you see the goals, policies, objectives in the land use element come forward in their legislative mode with recommendations, those will be pointed out.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Anders.
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful too. And I appreciate you showing us the a general plan right now.
That's what I wanted to get to. So Tim's really on point. We have gone through here and we have pointed some stuff out, and there's some tweaks between this table, which is your general plan land use, and the narrative. They don't match in some cases. So we've gone through this, and we'll go through it again because this is just fixing what we have. There's been a lot of discussion to have new things put in here, but I did want to show that is on the way for the committee to look at, and it will be and where we've made recommendations, we have notes in here for people to look at. So perfectly great segue to the next stuff that's coming along. So it isn't posted yet because it's not done, but it will be in short order.
Jean?
What is the significance specifically of the things that are pink? Because it's not underlined or strikeout like some of the other sections are. So what does that mean? Like you scrolled through one and it's got pink over it. What is that? Does that mean just look at this? We're going to look at this, or what does that mean?
Now, what it means is that Word, when you have a comment on the side, highlights the text that the comment refers to. That's all it
Okay.
means. So, for example, this is what you're talking about, this text here.
Yes, yes.
This just means that this comment, when the comment was put in, the author highlighted the whole thing and then just put a comment on the side. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
It's just it's the same here. Like this whole thing, and this is some of the zoning stuff that's in here, including the FAR. But that's all. That's all it means, Gene. There's no significance. I don't even get to choose the color. I'm stuck with.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just wanted to be sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, anybody else have their hand up? We can maybe get some public comment.
Yeah, we have a public member raising their hand.
Okay.
Jesse?
Hear me now?
Yes.
This is a great topic, man. If I can read through my notes quickly, ADUs are not going to be the final answer. It's a piece of the puzzle, same as inclusionary housing. They're pieces of the puzzle rather than what the public likes to call whack-a-mole. Right now, we rezone for high-density housing. Developer decides he'll take the 3 stories, he'll take the high density, but he won't build affordable housing. So then we rezone. Right now, we're 0 for 2 with the Village and with Hidden Grove. Either one want to build affordable housing, so we keep playing whack-a-mole as we'll move the high-density housing around. When we talk about ADUs, I think the county has already studied this. They've had their lawyers already go through this. If I go out to the county site right now, I can pick 3 different sizes for ADUs. I can get an estimate on cost. I don't need an architect. I can get the plans directly from them. And I know some people say, well, we only built 1 ADU last year, and we only built 3 before that. You're talking about numbers through a recession and a pandemic. I don't think those numbers are valid or they should be used because it's outside the scope of what reality is through a recession and a pandemic. What I really wanted to talk about way in the beginning was the business park. Business park has been a question mark for years on what we can use it for. I think, first of all, there has to be a traffic study done. As Mark pointed out, we're not going to cross the railroad tracks. So how do we move traffic in and out of the business park that we know the number of vehicles and the types of businesses that use those types of numbers with traffic flow? And then with that, we can actually look at a land use study to say, okay, it cannot be used for this. There's no way to move the traffic in and out of this area without going through residential neighborhoods. We're limited on that. And again, what is the current landowner? What are their plans for moving traffic in and out? And what are their plans for what the future use of that land is that they see it? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jesse. Great points. And I believe we brought that up last meeting, Mary Beth, where we were going to reach out to the landowner, correct?
Yes, and he has been reached out to. I have not heard a response back. The reach out was to bring him into these meetings, whether, at the meeting, after the meeting, watch the videos for both the Sierra College Boulevard north of the railroad, northwest of the railroad right away. That committee, and then also the umbrella committee of this one for land use, but I haven't heard a peep from him, so I don't know.
Have we just called him? Have we mailed him? Have we?
I emailed.
We may want to send him I don't know what the protocol is, but it would be nice to maybe find other means and get in touch with him if necessary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. He has a current application for a subdivision on file, so I know I have a correct email address for him, but I will reach out in a different way.
Okay. Any other public comment?
Matt Fox.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm the mysterious person that was on those submitted those comments earlier that we were talking about. I'm also on the housing element committee. I just want to quickly say that I don't my fear is the town's not going far enough to address this affordable housing issue. It's pretty clear that the 7 acres we have zoned for high density housing behind Rayleigh's is not going to end up getting, there's not going to be a single affordable housing unit built there, which means, if I understand correctly, that we will have 18 months, essentially, as soon as that project's approved, to find another 7 or 8 acres somewhere in town to zone for high density apartments, basically three-story apartments is what that means. So when you look at that land use map, look around and see where do you guys want to put the next 7 to 8 acres of 3-story apartments, because it's inevitable. And then I think we're going to be in an endless cycle here where we'll zone 7 or 8 acres for 3-story apartments, and then market rate apartments get built there. Then we're going to find another 7 or 8 acres. And I heard somebody mention earlier, well, we're a small town, we can't accommodate that. I don't think the state cares that we're a small town, that we don't have the land for it. We're going to have to find the land if that means at some point we're going to end up starting to rezone land that's already got a house on it. If there's a 5-acre lot that's got a house on it somewhere, that's going to have to end up being rezoned for high density apartments. I mean, it's inevitable. So the town's got some tough decisions to make here when it comes to affordable housing. And I don't think we're going far enough. I mean, these ADUs sound great, but that's not going to get us there. We really need to do something more, something bigger. And then lastly, real quick, is right now we're required to build these zone for 20 dwelling units an acre. From what I've read, I think that might go up to 30 dwelling units an acre here, maybe next cycle. Maybe that's something somebody knows about more than I do. But if it goes up to 30, and then we're required to allow a 50% density bonus on top of that, we're talking 45 units per acre. So that's probably 4 or 5-story apartment buildings that we could end up with if we don't address this issue. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, let's turn it back to our committee. Looks like I saw Ramona's hand.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have a question. So I understand that there's the regulatory part of RENA numbers in the new legislation, but the reality is that the extreme vast majority of all communities, county or municipalities, have actually not done anything different than Loomis. They've, let residential, market rate housing go in, then they pick a different area to rezone or whatever. I mean, what it really is pointing out to is that the regulation itself is absolutely ridiculous. And every community has recognized this, and therefore every community in general, except for a very, very few handful, have actually done any of this. So I guess where's the teeth in all of this? And are there more teeth than there used to be with any of these new legislations? And kind of leads to the bigger conversation is what's the prognosis for any of this in reality, in true reality of California? Is there any reward or any real reason for communities to jump over backwards and do backflips for regulations that really don't make sense? If there really isn't any teeth or any real rewards, I guess the question is, everybody's kicked the can down the road, and what's tactic wise, is really that the wisest thing to do, or is it not? I mean, just because someone says jump off the bridge because that's the regulation, do you jump off the bridge? I mean, just throwing it out there. I understand this is a problem and affordable housing is a problem, but to take a critical eye and look at what the reality is and how can you do the best thing for your community and provide affordable housing the best you can, given that the state regulation really is obviously not being followed by many or most. So I hope that makes sense. I'm just trying to get a reality check on these regulations and what they really mean in the long term, not just for our community, but for all the other communities that pretty much are in the same boat.
Yeah. Well said, Ramona. It is frustrating. I see Tim's hand up. Did anybody else have their hand up that I can't see?
No.
Okay, Tim.
Thanks again. Yeah, frustrating. You know, like City of Sacramento, they've got like 40,000 lots they have to dedicate to affordable housing. And that's like not going to happen in 15, 20 years. So it just keeps, Jesse's right. It's like whack-a-mole. You just have to keep adding to the housing, to your zoning every 7 or 8 years. Here's the solution for Loomis. All right. Bottom line. The best thing that Loomis can do for itself is build out 100% of itself. Build out, take all the big parcels that are currently vacant and allow for housing so that in the next 5 housing element cycles, the state can't come back and say, well, you need to zone for more. All you can go back and say is, well, we don't have any more space. So, you know, right now, Loomis is probably about 70% fully built out. And, you know, with a population of 7,000 people, you know, we think based on the available lots that are available for residential, medium density, there's probably room to fit 2,000 or 3,000 more people. Best thing that Loomis can do is build those out so that we don't have to be a slave to affordable housing requirements by the state. If that's really what people don't want to do. If we want to continue to play these games and make parcels available and not really intend to build affordable housing, and then we can slow play it, and the number just keeps piling up. But the best thing to do for any city, any town, is to fully build yourself out and fully mature yourself. I mean, that's what we want that's what I want with my town. I want to see a fully built out town, and maybe that population is 10,000 people. By all standards, that's still a small town. All right. So let's just not, be afraid. Let's play offense here. And when projects like the former village come forward that had 0 affordable housing accounted for, we should be more flexible, because you know what? There may be a time where an SB 330 plan comes forward, or an affordable housing developer comes forward and wants to build that out and do all affordable housing. If people really want affordable housing to take up all the vacant parcels in Loomis, then we should just continue to do what we're doing. Thank you. Those are my comments. Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other comments?
No.
All right.
Hands.
Okay. So, wow, we've had some really great discussions today. It's just been really, really good. So we are now going to have our next meeting on June the 3rd at 3 o'clock. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And then will you be able to send us, or Mary Beth, I don't know if you already did it, have us send us the link so that we can see all the public comments?
Yeah, as soon as it's in a state of posting, we will get that up there for you.
Okay, that's great.
And that link will go out to all committee members, because we want everybody to see them.
Okay, and then I just wanted to remind everybody, and I was going to mention this when I didn't get to start the meeting, but we are having our town council meeting on Tuesday, and we are going to be talking about the housing element. So please come, bring your public comment. Tell all your neighbors. We want to hear from everybody. And I guess if nobody has anything else, we will adjourn.
I have a couple of announcements.
Okay.
Number one, Ramona mentioned it, and that was the Guess the Density game. We just published that today, and that's going to be held next Wednesday, May 12th at 6 o'clock. It's only an hour long. It's a presentation by LGC in association with SACOG. And like Ramona said, it's really interesting to see what you think is there. So I encourage everybody to participate in that and invite your friends. The more the merrier there. Also, Social Pinpoint, we've talked about that. If you guys haven't been there, I can pop up the website and show you how it works if you're interested in that little display. But if everybody's comfortable with it, I won't put you through it. You touched on housing element for Tuesday's commission meeting, and I think that's all I had. Okay.
All right. Let's see. Okay, is there nobody else?
Nobody else.
Okay. Okay, and then maybe you could send us an email with some of those things that you mentioned to Mary Beth. Bonnie
Oh,
has
yeah.
her,
Yep.
Bonnie has her hand up. Go for it, Bonnie.
I'm really sorry, just trying to multitask with chauffeuring the kids around. So Tim made some points that I'd really like staff to respond to, just because I'm a little bit confused, because there were two comments made on, you know, both ends of this spectrum of an argument, and I just like staff to weigh in on like what's real, what's fact. Thanks.
Well, I can tell you that building out the community isn't going to make RENA go away. I'm working with communities in other part of the state that are building out, and they're having to deal with rehab and infill, and in some cases rezoning malls that are now defunct. So that's interesting, and I like the idea of building out the community. But I don't know that that's necessarily going to get you off what is essentially a state policy that is pretty much blind to the plight of small rural towns. So from that aspect, that's there. But I just wanted to chime in on that particular piece of it. The other thing that occurs to me is that if we add 2,000 people in the next 8 years and we build all this housing, that's exactly what the state's asking us to do. Everybody's high centered on the affordable piece, which I find relatively amusing. But we have to provide almost as much above moderate housing as we do low income housing. So, you know, the rest of that table is also essential, and we need to provide opportunities for that within the town. But from a land use perspective, we need to show that we have the opportunity. We don't actually have to build these. Town is not building these units. We simply show that we have the opportunity to do that. But Chairman, you are correct. Most of these cities, and I remember who it was, maybe it was Ramona that said, I've been kicking the can down the road for a while. There is some teeth involved in this. There is the potential, if we do not have a certified housing element, that we don't get grant funding or we don't get subventions from the state. So they have purse strings that they can pull. And if they continue to go down the rabbit hole, they could ultimately take over the planning department and remove land use authority from the community. Those are real. Those have happened. That's not just a boogeyman in the closet. It's obviously a last resort, and it's not something that anybody does lightly, but it has happened in modern time, and it's happened locally, just in the Bay Area. So, at the end of the day, if we plan for this stuff, then we have a say in where it goes and how it happens. If we don't plan for this stuff, then somebody else will make those decisions for us. So that's kind of the high level from at least my perspective in dealing with a number of communities that have the same arguments. I get the same thing from Rancho Cucamonga, where I'm helping there with a general plan update, that many of the town residents have said, why are we doing this? Blah, 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 blah. And I get it, and I totally understand it. But from my perspective, if you plan, you have skin in the game. If you don't plan, then somebody else will plan it for you. And given how DMV works, I really don't want the state planning my community. So that'd be my 2 cents on that.
Can I make a thought? Ramona brought up, we need to be talking about incentives for the housing. Just regulating it, having the big stick is not going to make it happen. So I think something to put in the back of our minds as we talk about the land use element, the housing element, are there things that could be done to incentivize affordable housing, which, affordable housing, for the kids that are moving out so they don't have to live in your ADU, or some of the public works people that they can live in town. So there's some real advantages to have affordable housing in the community from the standpoint of a complete community. So definitely put in the back of our minds, what incentives could we encourage a developer or land use or a landowner to come in and build the affordable housing. And that includes some of the ADUs. You know, what incentives beyond what has been provided further can be provided for ADUs.
Thank you. All right. Are we ready to adjourn now? I think so. Okay, so we'll go ahead and again, our next meeting is June 3rd, and have a great month. And hopefully we'll see everybody on Tuesday, the council meeting.
And Wednesday.
All right, bye. Oh, and Wednesday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right, thank you.